Okay, I hope these videos are going to be useful. Let me tell you, it's nice to create something where you could log on and find these materials because I know there's going to be questions. So I hope you don't mind I'm wearing the same shirt in every video. All right, so this one, see, I made a copy, so I would be sure to hit them all, is going to be about interpreting the unit maps and what we call a scope and sequence. And I can share with you a lot of that information by just going in them and kind of demonstrating them. And this might be useful because they, like I've said, they look different this year than they did last year, and some new enhancements and maybe some ways that you can use them to plan and internalize. I also downloaded a lot of things so that you could directly see lesson plans and the text themselves without being directly logged into our district resource. We're hoping the teachers will take the chance to read and internalize the lessons. You know, the actual reading of the text itself, being some of them are chunked to be smaller and digestible. If the teacher has a familiarity with it by reading it before teaching it, I think that's the number one goal. We're calling that like part of the internalization of a lesson. And then the going from there is to look at the lesson plan and the moves that we're going to make to be most effective, and to kind of mix up the opportunities for discussion, dialogue, writing, and the other ways that we process things as learners. So let me go directly in. Again, I'm going to go from scratch because I think the more times you can see it from if you just went straight in to our district locations, then the better off you are. So let's just pretend again, I'm not even on Chrome or anything yet. I'm going to open it. I'm going to make sure it's the right version of my account. It's going to go slow. Okay, there we go. That's me. I put my picture in there. It says kcpublicschools.org. Gives me a lot of clues. Okay, so I'm going to jump past some of these and I'm going to go directly to this third one. And it says KCPS Resource Hub. Remember, we're going to go directly to secondary curriculum. You're going to go here a lot, so we want it to be just as few steps as can be. Okay, and then you're going to come up here in the ELA, and we are going to hover this time over the little drop down, and you'll see all the grade levels are here. So let's see, which grade level could I model first? Let's just start with 6th grade. They're very similar in their construction. Different revision experts in our district helped work on them. So now I'm just going to kind of walk you through. So let's go to full screen. Okay, the first thing that's probably noticeable here is that this is the entire process, all 5 units, 1 through 5, and it indicates simply the standards that are going to be taught. And it's actually pretty close to the progression of how they are taught as well, from kind of top to bottom. So again, you would use this really as a bird's eye view to see the concepts that we're really focusing on. And you can see even just the amount of them that we're going to have fewer in the start of the year, kind of in unit 1. We're going to add a little bit more as we go. And really in unit 3 and 4, it's going to be kind of the depth on purpose that we're going to be into. We're building toward that. And then in unit 5 is a chance to really cement some of the things, but not as many of them as we saw in unit 3 and 4. Okay, so that's important, and do use that. You can print that out. It's 4 pages, but you could highlight and circle and do all kinds of things to it that way. Okay, also, these are scope and sequence per unit, and these are in direct order of how they correlate with kind of, again, top to bottom. That would go chronologically through the unit. They're also featuring, if I just open one of these, you'll see we can pop out on each document, and it'll be a PDF, so you could print it and do whatever you like. In your world, you can just copy these however many times you want. They also keep the features when you have them not printed. So there's a proficiency scale associated with every skill. And this is one of the places you'll find them in a way that you could easily correlate when you're doing some planning. They're just kind of connected to the most logical one that would fit with that standard. This is the language directly from our Missouri Learning Standards. And then these links are also what you call item specifications. So let's just try this very popular one. This is a vocabulary informational text standard. And it'll open the page that comes directly from DESE You don't have to go to DESE to find it, and you don't have to go through 100 documents. It's just this one, all right? So I've chopped it off for you. Included in this document is kind of the goals of the standard, what level it's probably assessed at a ceiling here of DOK2, particularly in 6th grade. It's important to notice. Later grades, different ceiling, but same concept and same skill. There's also sample stems, ways to practice or assess the understanding of that standard. Okay, so that is just the scope and sequence. You'll see in the scope and sequence, there's only conceptual understandings as goals, and those are going to parallel with the same words you would see both in our resource, Study Sync, and in the unit maps that I'm going to show you in just a second. Okay, something else to watch as we go through this unit, as far as going through the progressions, is it starts with vocabulary and it introduces those terms that we both consider academic and specific to the content we're reading. So those are, important to hit because they're going to arm people with a chance to use those words as the unit goes on with more certainty, and deservingly so, because that really, is one of the biggest vehicles to traveling the text. Okay, so this chunk up here that is in white is primarily a reading goal, and we're reading those standards under this reading standard. You'll see when it changes to orange, this is writing, and this is the extended writing project, and there are 3 of those, and I'll show you on the unit maps. You get to choose, and maybe let your students choose, which of those 3, and even more than 3 sometimes, projects might work the best for your unit. So that writing concept comes and goes in the middle of the unit, and then you return. I want to make sure people realize for the remainder of your days in your unit, with doing kind of half writing and half reading as we go on to structure the rest of the unit. So I'll show you that, and it spells itself out even better, I think, in the unit maps. Okay, so that's the scope and sequence. Again, those are directly on your 6th grade page. Okay, the curriculum maps. So all I'm doing is scrolling down. I'm going to go into 6th grade, unit 1, and I'm going to pop this one out. Okay, I'm going to make this one a little bigger for us here. Okay, hopefully that's visible to you. Okay, so there's a lot of features to explore, and definitely something to read and think about as you're getting ready to teach the unit, but then also a document to use for you to kind of steer your path, and hopefully along the way have access to almost everything you need when you need it. So first thing you'll notice, these are thematic design units. Thematic design allows us to focus on a genre, but also to make sure that we're featuring the many ways that you might see examples of this theme in different forms of literature. By studying informational and literary text at the same time, what happens is we get a chance to compare the two to each other. And that is really the mechanism. There's a lot of comparison contrast going on throughout the units that you'll see and the way they're designed. Okay, so it has a unit description. We have the essential question, which is essentially the question that leads the way, that we unpack the entire path. And essentially this could be about a 5-week or a 6-week unit. There's a lot of getting started that happens, so we want to account for that. But we're really going to try to hit in our chunks of time this year, the first 5 units. The 6th unit we would use instead for summer school, and it's a great chance to review because it features a lot of the content that you see in units 1 through 5. Okay, so I want you to study this page a little bit. On the left are academic essential questions. On the far bottom are some of the enduring understandings that I have pulled in that we hope students realize are part of reading and writing. They are generally the same as we go on 6 through 12. Even DESE reflects that once you get to basically 6th grade through 12th grade, you're really working on building up a concept that stays not exactly the same, but builds, very logically toward 12th grade. So that is not the same thing as saying like the vertical alignment. So that's another thing to look for. All right, on the far right, this is where some of the writing opportunities are that I mentioned at the map will be in orange. So the summative tests and the summative writing task are all in this big box up here on the right. And the end of unit 1 revised, you would be able to just go here, and this would be the assessment that you would give at the very end of the unit. And so it's already here, and students would go in through StudySync. It's important that you don't teach this, but you keep it fresh so that the first time they've seen it, it serves as a test. But it's important that you read it and study it, because then you can learn other ways without showing it to them to prepare them for those style of questions or that kind of thinking. Okay, so these are the 3 options that you have in each unit this year. The first is an oral presentation project. And perhaps that is one that you would want to work on. It serves a lot of the ELs, students who are second language learners, maybe even better than it might serve the writing project. And so that's a decision to make. It's also an option that students would perhaps have a choice. As you go on in the year, you'll see these 3 options are in each unit. So maybe in one unit, you decide to develop a choice. Okay, there's a project-based learning performance task aligned with this unit. So it's possible that for one of the units, you decide you do not want to do the traditional writing prompt, but instead to invoke this project. I will tell you this is at the beginning of the unit map because you need to know that before you start teaching the unit. You would want to uniquely kind of move toward the project if that's what you were going to do instead. Okay, the writing prompt is here, and when you click on it, you can read it, but it also features a variation of the essential question. So it's important to know that these writing projects really do mirror the goal that we start with and that we finish with, and students should know that the whole time and before we get started. Okay, let's move down the map a little bit. Here are the proficiency scales that I mentioned. You can reference these as ways to see where there might be gaps in student learning or concepts, and where, as far as level 2 goes, you might find foundational skills that we really need to address. Okay, we have resources in our midst. So 2 of them that we use the most are StudySync and Newsela. I will say I added a link this year right here, and this is kind of associated with the theme, or really associated with the theme. And so I really just included a new way to search Newsela directly from there that will take you to that theme. You could offer that chance to students so they could choose a theme related text, or you could go in there and pick your own theme related text. Here's the vocabulary that you're going to want to preview with students and yourself. The words on the left being academic and specific to the study of English. The words on the right being specific to the reading selections, and some of the words you're going to need to discuss the theme that we're working with. Okay, let's keep going. There's a lot here at the start, and I hope you find that you have time to explore those things. It's all public as we speak, so please do and ask questions. There's a 6th grade link to a new resource this year that we haven't had before called Vocabulary. You might try that. I put a link here to writer's notebooks kind of guides, so that if you're going to do note taking, which I strongly encourage, and maybe record definitions and have chances to reflect on our thinking, you can do that for a student by probably finding a way for every student to have their own writer's notebook. And again, track their thinking. There's also a 6th grade vocab workbook right here housed in the same place. Okay, more thinking about how to do the teaching in this unit. There are 4 strategies that we want to focus on the most. And so when you click on these links, you'll go directly to some suggested ones that can help you attend to that area of need. Okay, this is the support hub. I already showed you that. So if you go in there, it's another chance to find some help on any number of things. This is a research-based alignment of how what we're doing does meet the goals research practices show. And then we're going to get into really the map itself. Okay, so take a deep breath. That was a lot. But from here, maybe this will be reassuring. Okay, so on the first day, the hope is that you'll be in StudySync, maybe or maybe not, print text, digital text, one or the other. That would be the best goal. Because the more we introduce students to the things we're going to use, early on, the more they get used to them, and then the more it becomes kind of commonplace that we're going to do so. The longer we wait, it does get hard to kind of implement it as part of our classroom culture or the way we operate. The print text that you also have, you'll probably want to think of a way to label those and store them carefully in your classroom some way. You don't use them all the time, but when you do, so that it's convenient and able to be accessed by your users, your students. Okay, so I'm on day 1. Here's the standard we're focusing on. We're really kicking off the unit with what's called a blast. And so I can click on this blast part right here, and it's actually going to give me a snapshot of the lesson plan and what you would do to introduce the blast, all the processes, all the questions you could potentially ask, the things you would have them record in their writer's notebook, the research links that you might want to include that you don't have to, because this will extend the assignment. You'll see it'll say optional, but they are really cool to work in. It's a good way to do kind of a little bit longer version of a blast where we go into groups and students have different readings and then jigsaw back kind of what their reading had to do with our theme. So really those lesson plans are there. This should be the passage itself. Let's see if it really is. Yeah, so it actually is. And this, in the event that you wanted to read what the students are going to read before you teach it and not have to be in StudySync itself, I made sure to include it with suggestions from our revision team right there. Okay, so while you're teaching this first reading, it's also hoped that you would have time, because in a lot of our schools, we're in a 90-minute class period, that you would start the process of teaching these skill lessons. And there are 3 here. They fit real nicely at the beginning of the unit. They talk about content vocabulary, academic vocabulary, and the genre of fiction. So that's really foundational for us to set that up. We're going to talk about nonfiction when we read the blast, because it's about what we really do when life gets hard. It's not a narrative that's based on unreal events. This one starts off very real, but then we move directly to a narrative. You'll see as it's RL, the literature standards, instead of the RI, informational standards. But just be aware that when we go to this day 2 through 4, days 2, 3, and 4, that you might experience, all right, one text read multiple times and one major skill or concept that we're going to visit through this text and practice, and maybe even then come back to, because on the far right here are some other lessons that you might need for reteaching, or perhaps just with a different angle than the first one. Okay, so essentially that is how it is set up all the way down. You'll see the 2 standards in play here. The only reason this is any different is that there's 2 skills or concepts, but and there's also 2 readings. Just a piece, we do excerpts with the idea that students could always go on and read the rest themselves. And we kind of introduce them to a variety of chances to do that throughout the year. But it's also a chance to have different tastes and different interests, so that we're not reading one thing and hoping everybody really is buying in for a long, long period of time. It's also a chance to practice the skills we use when we visit a text for the first time, which we call the productive struggle. Okay, so here's the text, it's above. Here's the lesson plans that go with how to do the first read. Here's a lesson plan that goes with how to do the close read. In between the first and the close read, the goal would be to teach the lesson on dramatic elements and structure, because they're going to apply the dramatic elements and structure skill in the writing that they do in the close read. Okay, so if I'm on day 9 through 11, we're almost halfway through this unit. I wanted you to see, whoa, let's get the narrative started. Okay, and then again, these are the lesson plans that you could read and help inform. But this is the tab that also opens up in StudySync that you're going to get trained on, and that I'm going to show you again in another video coming down the street here when we get down to that, how to use the resource part. But I also want you to know that if that's worrisome, that's why I made the ELA hub, and there's a lot of little small 2 or 3 minute videos, generally that are in order of how to go through a unit like this. Okay, so these are the skills we would associate with narrative writing. And you can see how each one of these has a separate lesson plan and is better done in small parts, building toward a larger goal, because students are going to have a chance, hopefully not just to procrastinate the whole big thing to the end, and you can manage that. That's part of the hardest part, I tell you, in being an ELA teacher, is really helping students get better at managing the writing process. So please let me know. I can support that with you. Okay, and then you'll see just we're still in basically the middle of the unit, but what I wanted to indicate on the map is we haven't stopped reading. And if you're spending half of your class period going into the first parts of the writing process plan on day 12, roll down here on day 12 also and pick up the start of this reading, because in a long class period like we have in most cases, anything done for 50 minutes is really not very effective, and definitely done for 90 minutes. We probably needed to do 3 or 4 things in that time. So bring back in the reading. I've even thought to structure it. Let's see how long we can keep our focus on the writing team with the classroom environment focused that way. And if I need to, I'll start the next reading, not as a threat, but just as a reality that we're going to run out of focus perhaps. Okay, so do know that as these days progress, there are more readings. Some of these can be done independently. Some of these can be decided to be done for certain groups and not others. Someone could go on in your class. Someone could need to revisit a concept. But please know that there's enough reading here by exploring this for at least 30 days, that by the day 26 or maybe day 30, which would be absolutely fine, that you're exploring there again, doing the end of unit assessment. Okay, so that's one unit map, kind of beginning to end. And I'm going to stop there. And thanks for watching. I hope that helps. And please refer back to it when you need it and email me when you have these questions.